Ayan had always been the kind of person everyone liked. He wasn't rich, but he was honest, kind, and hardworking. He lived in a small town where people knew each other by name, where smiles were still real and gossip spread faster than the wind. His life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. He worked as a delivery driver for a local food company, and every day he rode around town with a sense of quiet purpose. His work may not have been glamorous, but it paid the bills, and that was enough for him. He lived with his mother and younger sister in a modest 2-room house. His father had passed away years ago, and since then, Ayan had become the man of the family. His mother's health wasn't good. She suffered from breathing problems, so Ayan always made sure she had her medicines on time. His sister, a bright student, was studying at the nearby college, and Ayan was proud of her. He often said, "You'll make it big one day. You'll do what I couldn't." He worked long hours to make sure she never had to give up her studies because of money. Every night after finishing his deliveries, he would sit on the small balcony looking at the streetlights, thinking about his dreams. He often imagined himself owning a small cafe someday, something cozy where people could come for coffee, talk, and laugh. He even had a name in mind for it, though he never told anyone. It was his quiet dream, something that gave him a reason to keep pushing through the long, tiring days. Ayan wasn't someone who complained. He believed that everyone had their share of struggles. He smiled even when he was tired, and people liked him for that. The shopkeepers, the customers, even the little kids who ran around the street, they all greeted him with warmth. Life moved in its usual rhythm, steady and predictable, until one evening when everything changed. That day had started like any other. The sun was bright. The air smelled of dust and tea from roadside stalls, and Ayan had a full list of deliveries to make. He worked non-stop since morning, skipping lunch to save time. The orders kept coming in, and by evening he was exhausted. He looked at his watch and sighed. It was past 9, and he still had one more stop left. The sky had begun to turn gray, and the first drops of rain had started to fall. By the time he finished his last delivery, the rain had turned into a steady downpour. His jacket was soaked, his hands numb, and his stomach growled. He was just about to head home when his phone buzzed. It was one of his old friends calling him to join for tea at a roadside stall nearby. He hesitated for a moment. His body wanted rest, but his mind thought maybe a warm cup of tea and some laughter would be nice after a long day. He decided to stop by for a few minutes before heading home. When he arrived, his friends were already there, sitting under the tin roof of the stall. The rain drummed loudly above them, and steam from boiling tea filled the air. The familiar chatter, the smell of fried snacks, and the sound of laughter made him feel light again. For a while he forgot his exhaustion. They talked about old school days, work struggles, and dreams that never seemed to come true. Someone mentioned how hard life had become, and Ayan just smiled. "We're still lucky," he said quietly. "At least we have people who care about us." Everyone nodded. For a few moments it felt like the world wasn't so heavy. One of the friends had brought a small bottle of alcohol and poured it secretly into his teacup. He laughed and told the others to try it. It would make them forget the tiredness of the day. Ayan wasn't used to drinking. He shook his head. "Not for me," he said with a smile. But his friends kept pushing. "Come on, just a few sips. It's cold, it'll warm you up. Don't be so serious." At first he refused, but as the rain kept falling and laughter filled the air, he gave in. Maybe one sip wouldn't hurt, he thought. Just this once. He took the cup and drank, feeling a slight burn in his throat. He laughed along with the others, feeling his body loosen up. Time passed quickly. What was meant to be a short tea break turned into 2 hours of chatting and stories. When he finally decided to leave, it was almost midnight. The rain had slowed, but the roads were still wet and slippery. He picked up his helmet, waved goodbye, and rode off into the quiet night. The streets were mostly empty. Just the sound of rainwater flowing into drains. The streetlights reflected off the wet roads, creating a blur of orange and gold. Ayan's thoughts drifted as he rode, about his family, his cafe dream, his tiredness, and the comfort of his bed waiting for him at home. Then, for a brief second, he felt dizzy. The road curved sharply ahead and he slowed down. The light rain had made the road shine like glass. As he turned the corner, something moved suddenly in front of him, a shadow quick and unexpected. Ayan pressed the brakes hard, but his bike slipped. There was a loud crash, the sound of metal against the road, and then silence. He felt pain shoot through his arm and knee, but worse was the sight in front of him. An old man lay on the ground still, his grocery bag scattered across the road. Ayan's heart stopped. He jumped off his bike and ran toward him. "Uncle, are you okay? Please open your eyes," he shouted, shaking him gently. The man groaned faintly but didn't respond. Panic filled Ayan's chest. He looked around, no one was there. The rain had started again, light but cold. He picked up the man with trembling hands and waved frantically at a passing car. The driver stopped, helped him lift the man, and together they rushed him to the nearest hospital. In the emergency room, Ayan stood soaked and shaking, his clothes wet and his hands covered with small cuts. The nurses took the man in while he waited outside, pacing back and forth. Every minute felt like an hour. He kept whispering to himself, "Please be okay. Please don't let anything happen to him." He didn't care about his own injuries or his bike. He just wanted the man to survive. After what felt like forever, a doctor came out. His expression was serious. "Are you the one who brought him?" Ayan nodded quickly. The doctor sighed. "He's in critical condition. We'll do our best. You should call his family if you know them." Ayan didn't even know who the man was. He had just appeared out of nowhere on the road. He waited the whole night at the hospital, his heart heavy with guilt and fear. The rain stopped before sunrise, but the darkness inside him didn't lift. He sat on a chair, his head in his hands, whispering prayers he hadn't said in years. When the morning light came through the hospital window, the doctor walked out again. This time Ayan didn't need to ask. He saw the look on the doctor's face and knew the truth. The old man didn't make it. For a few seconds, the world went silent. The sounds of the hospital faded away. Ayan stood frozen, unable to breathe. He felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him. His mistake, one small careless mistake, had taken a life. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might stop too. He sank into the nearest chair, staring at the floor, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from his hair. The nurse spoke to him softly, but he couldn't hear a word. All he could think about was the man's face, the groceries on the road, and the sound of the crash replaying in his head again and again. When the police arrived to take his statement, Ayan didn't argue. He didn't try to run. He just nodded, answering their questions quietly, his eyes empty. They said they would contact the man's family. The words cut through him like a knife. Somewhere out there, a family had just lost someone they loved, and it was because of him. That morning, as the police took him away, Ayan looked out at the rising sun. It was the same sun that had risen every day of his life, but it didn't feel the same anymore. He knew that everything had changed. The peace he once had, the dreams he once held, the small happiness he once felt. They were all gone, washed away by one terrible moment. He didn't know then, but that night would follow him for the rest of his life. The sound of rain, the glow of streetlights, the smell of wet asphalt, everything would remind him of that single mistake. One mistake that would turn into one lifelong regret. The sound of the police van door closing behind Ayan still echoed in his ears as they drove him to the station. The world outside was bright now. The rain had stopped and people were starting their normal day. But for him, nothing felt normal anymore. The streets he once knew so well now looked strange and distant. He sat quietly, his hands trembling, his mind replaying that single moment again and again, the shadow on the road, the brakes, the sound of the crash, and the silence after. At the station, the officers took his details. They asked him questions about what happened, and Ayan answered everything honestly. He didn't try to hide or make excuses. His voice was weak, his throat dry, but his heart was heavier than it had ever been. One of the officers, an older man, looked at him for a long moment and said softly, "You should have called us right away." Ayan nodded. "I know," he whispered. I just wanted to save him. They didn't treat him harshly. They could see he was broken already. Still, the law had to take its course. He was kept in a small cell that night. The sound of rain dripping from the roof outside mixed with the ticking of a wall clock. He sat in a corner, knees pulled to his chest, unable to stop shaking. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the old man's face. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The next morning, they allowed him to make a call. His hands trembled as he dialed his mother's number. When she answered, her voice was calm at first, but when he told her what had happened, she went silent. He could hear her breathing heavily. "I'm sorry, Ami," he whispered, tears rolling down his cheeks. "It was an accident." She didn't say much. She just said, Come home when you can. Those words broke him even more. Later that day, the police informed him that the old man's family had arrived at the hospital. The man's name was Rashid, a retired schoolteacher who was loved by almost everyone in the neighborhood. He had 2 grown children, a son who worked in another city and a daughter who lived nearby. They were heartbroken. The police told Ayan that the family wanted to see justice done. He didn't blame them. If he were in their place, he would have felt the same. He was charged with reckless driving under the influence. The alcohol in his system wasn't much, but it was enough. The realization hit him like a stone. If only he hadn't taken that drink. If only he had gone straight home. One small yes had destroyed 2 families. Days turned into weeks as the case moved forward. Ayan was granted bail after some time, but the damage to his life had already been done. When he returned home, the neighborhood that once greeted him with smiles now stared in silence. People whispered when he walked by. Some pitied him, others avoided him. The delivery company he worked for had already let him go. His friends, the same ones who had pushed him to drink that night, stopped answering his calls. At home, things were no easier. His mother looked weaker and his sister spoke little. She tried to act normal, cooking and cleaning like before, but the warmth in her voice was gone. The house felt heavy, filled with silence and unspoken pain. Ayan spent most of his time sitting by the window, watching the street he used to love. He barely slept. Some nights he heard the rain again in his dreams, along with the screech of his brakes. He tried to apologize to the old man's family. He wrote a letter and gave it to a mutual friend to deliver. In it, he poured his heart out. He told them he was sorry, that he would do anything to undo what happened. He didn't expect forgiveness. He just wanted them to know he wasn't a bad person, just a foolish one. Days passed, but he never got a reply. When the court date came, Ayan stood before the judge, his head bowed. The lawyer assigned to him spoke on his behalf, explaining that it was an accident and that he had no past record. The old man's family sat on the other side of the courtroom, their faces filled with grief. Ayan couldn't look at them. He felt unworthy to even stand there. The judge spoke calmly, stating that though the act wasn't intentional, it couldn't go unpunished. Ayan was sentenced to a short term in prison and a fine. The words felt like stones falling on his chest. He didn't argue. He accepted it, quietly thanking the judge before being taken away. Prison was a different world, cold walls, echoing corridors, faces that had seen too much. At first, he didn't speak to anyone. He kept to himself, thinking about his mother and sister, wondering how they were managing without him. Some nights, he would sit on his bunk, staring at the small window high above. He'd whisper prayers, not asking for freedom, but for forgiveness. Over time, a few of the older inmates started talking to him. They could tell he wasn't like the others. One of them said, "Guilt is a heavy chain, my friend. It won't go away until you find a reason to live with it." Those words stayed with Ayan. After months, when he was finally released, he returned home quietly. His mother hugged him tightly, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't say much, only whispered, "It's over now. Let's start again." But Ayan knew it wasn't over. The law might have forgiven him, but he hadn't forgiven himself. The world outside had moved on, but his heart hadn't. He tried to find work, but no one wanted to hire him once they learned about his past. He ended up doing odd jobs, cleaning, unloading goods, fixing bikes, anything that would help him earn a few rupees. He didn't mind the hard work. It was the silence from others that hurt the most. Sometimes he passed by the street where the accident happened. Every time he would stop and look at the spot. The road had been repaved, the streetlight fixed, and life went on as if nothing had happened. But for him, that road held every regret he had ever known. He would stand there quietly, his eyes wet, before walking away again. One evening, he saw a small boy drop his bicycle near that same corner. The boy fell and scraped his knee, crying loudly. Ayan ran to him, picked him up, and took him to the nearby pharmacy. The boy stopped crying after a while and smiled weakly. "Thank you, Uncle," he said. That small word, uncle, hit something deep inside Ayan. It reminded him that he still had the chance to do good, even if it couldn't erase the past. He began helping people quietly, wherever he could. Fixing someone's flat tire, giving food to stray dogs, buying bread for an old woman at the shop. Small things. It didn't make his guilt disappear, but it helped him breathe again. His mother noticed the change in him. One night she said, You can't change what's done, but you can live in a way that brings peace to others. That's how you honor the life you took. Her words stayed with him. He started volunteering at a local charity that helped feed the poor. The people there didn't know his story, and he didn't tell them. He just worked quietly, carrying sacks of rice, serving food, washing dishes. Sometimes he'd see a smile on someone's face, and for a moment the weight in his chest felt a little lighter. But despite his efforts, nights were the hardest. When the world was quiet, the memories would come rushing back. The sound of the rain, the sight of the old man falling, the sirens, the flashing lights. He often sat by his window watching the moonlight, wondering if the man's family would ever forgive him. He didn't expect it, but he still hoped one day they might find peace even if he never did. Years began to pass slowly. Ayan aged quietly, his hair starting to turn gray, his hands rough from years of work. His sister finished her studies and moved to another city, and his mother's health grew weaker. Before she passed away, she held his hand and said, "Don't waste your life in regret. Do good, and maybe one day you'll forgive yourself." After she was gone, Ayan felt lonelier than ever. But her words stayed alive in his heart. He decided to dedicate his life to helping others, hoping it would bring meaning to his broken soul. That one mistake had taken a life and changed his forever. It became a shadow that followed him everywhere. But over time, he learned to live with it, not by forgetting, but by trying to make his days count. Every morning when he stepped outside, he whispered a quiet prayer, not for himself, but for the man whose life ended that night. He hoped that somewhere, somehow, that man's soul had found peace, and that maybe one day he would too. After his mother's death, Ayan's world became quieter than ever before. The house that once echoed with her coughs, her prayers, and the sound of utensils in the kitchen now stood silent. He often caught himself waking up early, thinking she would be sitting on the bed with her cup of tea, but there was only emptiness. The smell of her medicine still lingered in the air. He didn't have the heart to remove them. Every morning he sat in the small courtyard, staring at the patch of sky between the rooftops. The same thought repeated in his mind again and again, how one mistake had stolen everything from him. He had lost his peace, his dreams, his work, and now even his mother. He often wondered if this was how punishment worked, not always through prison walls, but through the weight of loneliness that never left your chest. The days passed slowly. He didn't talk much to anyone. The neighbors had grown used to seeing him quiet, walking with his head down, doing odd jobs to survive. He didn't meet his friends anymore. Most of them had moved on with their lives, married, settled, raising families. Sometimes he saw them from afar, laughing at a tea stall, and a small smile appeared on his face. He didn't blame them for staying away. Maybe he would have done the same if he were in their place. He had learned to live with silence. But silence has a strange way of talking back. On some nights, when the wind blew through the open window, he heard the sound of that night again. The brakes, the crash, the rain, the helpless cry he imagined the man might have let out. He tried covering his ears, but memories don't stop with your hands. They stay inside. To escape his thoughts, Ayan began walking long distances. He walked miles through the streets, sometimes to the edge of the town where the field started. Walking gave him a strange comfort. He would watch people working, children running around, couples talking by the roadside. Life went on for everyone else as if nothing had happened. One afternoon, he saw a group of young men repairing the roof of a small community center. The building looked worn out. The paint faded, the boards cracked. He walked closer and asked if they needed help. They said they were short on hands, so he joined them without expecting pay. The work was tiring, but it made him feel useful again. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of purpose, even if it was small. When the job was done, the man in charge thanked him and handed him a little money. Ayan refused at first, but the man insisted. He took it not because of greed, but because it felt like a sign. Maybe life was quietly giving him another chance to stand up again. He used that money to buy school notebooks and pencils, which he gave to a few children in his neighborhood. Their smiles were wide, their laughter genuine. One of the little girls said, "Uncle, thank you. Now I can draw again." That small sentence stayed with him all night. It was the first time in years someone had thanked him with such joy. Slowly, Ayan started helping more. He fixed broken fans for old neighbors, carried heavy groceries for the elderly woman across the street, and repaired bicycles for kids who couldn't afford to take them to a shop. People began to notice his quiet kindness. They still knew his past, but they also saw the man he was becoming. But deep down, Ayan knew he was not doing this to earn respect. He was doing it to ease the pain inside, to feel that maybe, in small ways, he could give back what he had once taken. He often told himself that doing good wouldn't erase his mistake, but at least it wouldn't let that mistake be the last thing that defined him. One evening, while walking through the market, he saw a man struggling to push his cart up a slope. Without thinking, Ayan ran and helped him push it. The man smiled gratefully and said, "The world needs more people like you." Those words hit him hard. If only that man knew who he really was. For a moment, Ayan wanted to tell him everything, to confess his past, but then he stopped himself. Maybe doing good was enough confession for now. The next few months were simple but steady. Ayan began volunteering regularly at the same charity kitchen he once helped. They gave free meals to poor families, and he found comfort there. He didn't talk much, just worked quietly, washing plates, serving food, cleaning floors. The people there respected him for his dedication, not knowing the storm he carried inside. But even as he tried to rebuild his life, some wounds refused to close. One day he saw the teacher's daughter at the market, the same woman whose father had died in that accident. She was carrying a small bag of vegetables, her face calm but tired. Ayan froze. His hands started shaking. He didn't know if he should approach her or walk away. His heart pounded loudly in his chest. He finally took a step forward and whispered softly, "I'm sorry." She looked at him, her eyes wide with shock. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she just nodded and walked away. Ayan stood there, unable to move. That one silent nod meant more to him than 1,000 words. It didn't feel like forgiveness, but it also didn't feel like hate. That night, he couldn't sleep. Her face kept appearing in his mind. Not angry, not bitter, just quiet. It made him realize that maybe forgiveness isn't something people give you all at once. Sometimes it's something they start to understand slowly, the same way you learn to live with pain. Time went on, and the seasons changed. Ayan's hair started to turn white at the sides, his hands rough and wrinkled. The children in the neighborhood began to call him Uncle Ayan. Some of them came to his house for help with schoolwork, and he enjoyed teaching them. He had never been a teacher, but he found peace in explaining small things like sums and spellings. It reminded him of the man whose life had ended because of him, a teacher who must have helped hundreds of students in his time. Sometimes Ayan wondered if helping children was his way of keeping that man's kindness alive. One rainy evening, years after the accident, Ayan was closing the gate of the community center where he volunteered when he saw a little boy standing outside, drenched and crying. The boy had lost his way home. Ayan took him inside, gave him a towel, and made him sit near the heater. The boy stopped crying and smiled faintly. When his parents arrived, they were overwhelmed with gratitude. The boy's father said, "You don't know how thankful we are." Ayan smiled gently and said, "Just make sure he reaches home safe next time." As they left, he stood by the door, watching the rain fall. That night he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is how life gives you a second chance to protect someone when once you couldn't." But even with these moments of peace, the guilt never left completely. Sometimes he would sit alone in his small house looking at an old photo of his family, his mother, his sister, and him. He'd whisper softly, "I'm still trying, Ami. I'm still trying to be better." The people in the town eventually stopped talking about his past. He became known as the quiet man who helped everyone, who never said no when someone needed a hand. But Ayan never forgot. He didn't want to forget. Forgetting would mean running away from the truth, and he had done enough of that in his life. Years later, on the anniversary of the accident, he went back to that same road. The streetlight had been replaced. The paint on the road faded, but he remembered every inch of it. He stood there in the drizzle, holding a small candle in his hand. He placed it on the sidewalk, whispered a prayer, and said softly, "I hope your soul is at peace. I still carry you with me." The wind blew gently, flickering the candlelight but not putting it out. Ayan watched it burn, his eyes full of quiet tears. For the first time in years, he didn't feel crushed by guilt. He just felt human, someone who had made a terrible mistake but had spent his life trying to do right after it. As he walked back home that night, he didn't look back at the road. He didn't need to. The past would always be there, but he had learned something important. It's not about forgetting what you did, but about what you choose to do after. Years passed quietly, and Ayan slowly built a rhythm in his life again. He had become a familiar face at the orphanage where he now volunteered full-time. It wasn't a big place, just a few rooms, a small kitchen, and a yard where children played. The walls were cracked and the paint had faded, but there was warmth inside, the kind that comes from laughter and shared meals. Every morning, Ayan would arrive early, sweeping the yard, making breakfast, and helping the children get ready for school. They called him Uncle Ayan, a name that made him smile every time. It reminded him that despite all the pain he carried, he could still bring comfort to others. The children had become his world. They were noisy, playful, and full of energy. Some had no parents. Others had families who couldn't afford to raise them. Each child had a story, and Ayan listened to them patiently. He loved how innocent they were, how easily they could find joy in small things, a new pencil, a ball, a piece of candy. Their laughter filled the emptiness in his heart, though deep inside, he never forgot the shadow of his past. In the evenings, after the children had gone to bed, Ayan would sit on the steps outside and look at the stars. He often spoke quietly to himself, sometimes to God, sometimes to the man he had lost all those years ago. "I'm trying," he would say softly. "I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can make life better for someone else." People in the town had grown to respect him again. They didn't talk about the accident anymore. To them, he was the man who always helped, the one who never said no when someone needed something fixed or someone to talk to. But even with their respect, Ayan never felt proud. He didn't see himself as a good man. He just saw himself as someone trying to make peace with the mistakes that haunted him. One afternoon, the orphanage manager told him that a new donor wanted to visit and meet the children. Ayan didn't think much of it. Visitors came sometimes, kind people who donated clothes, food, or money. But this time was different. When the visitor arrived, Ayan's heart skipped a beat. It was the teacher's daughter, the same woman he had seen years ago at the market. She looked older now, more mature, dressed in simple clothes, her face calm. She smiled gently at the children as they surrounded her, showing their drawings and school books. Ayan stood in the corner, frozen. His hands felt cold and his heart began to race. He thought about leaving quietly before she noticed him, but fate had other plans. One of the little boys ran to her and said, "That's Uncle Ayan. He takes care of us." She turned her head toward him. Their eyes met. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Time seemed to stop. The sounds of the children's laughter faded, and all Ayan could hear was the echo of that night, the rain, the crash, and his own voice begging the man to open his eyes. She took a step closer. Ayan felt his throat tighten. "I remember you," she said softly. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't cold either. It was calm, steady, almost gentle. Ayan lowered his head. "I didn't expect to see you here," he whispered. She nodded. "I didn't expect to see you either. I've heard about the work you do here." He swallowed hard. "I don't do much. I just try to help." For a moment, there was silence between them. Then she said, "You've changed." Ayan didn't know what to say. His eyes filled with tears, but he held them back. "I don't know if I've changed," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm just trying to live with what I did." The woman looked around the orphanage and the old walls, the broken swings, the barefoot children playing. "They love you," she said. "You've given them something most people never get, kindness." Ayan didn't respond. His voice trembled as he finally asked, "Do you hate me?" She looked down for a moment before answering. "I used to," she admitted. "For a long time I couldn't forgive you. I thought about that night again and again, wondering how you could take such a good man from us. My father was my best friend." Her voice broke slightly, but she steadied herself. "But as years passed, I realized that holding on to hate only hurts more. My father used to say forgiveness is the hardest kind of kindness. I didn't understand it then. I do now." Ayan couldn't speak. His eyes burned with tears. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said softly. "I just pray that wherever he is, he knows how sorry I am. I've spent my whole life trying to make up for that night." She nodded slowly. "I think he'd be proud of what you're doing here," she said. "He always believed in second chances. Maybe this is yours." Her words felt like a wave washing over him, warm, painful, and healing at the same time. For the first time in years, Ayan felt something lift from his chest, something heavy and dark that had been there since that night. Before she left, she turned back and said, "You can't change the past, but you can keep doing good." That's what he would have wanted. After she was gone, Ayan sat on the steps, his heart full. He finally let the tears flow freely. It wasn't forgiveness in words, but it was something deeper. Understanding. She didn't have to say she forgave him. Her presence, her calm voice, her kindness, they said everything. That night, the children found him still sitting there, his face wet with tears but his eyes peaceful. One of the boys asked, "Uncle, why are you crying?" He smiled and said, "Because sometimes, even when you lose everything, life still gives you a small reason to smile again." The following days felt different. The air seemed lighter, the sun a bit warmer. Ayan began to feel a new sense of peace. The burden of guilt didn't disappear completely, but it no longer crushed him. He started planting flowers in the orphanage yard, something he had always wanted to do. He told the children, "Flowers remind us that even after rain, life blooms again." The kids laughed as they helped him dig the soil. They didn't understand the deeper meaning behind his words, but he did. Weeks later, the same woman returned, this time with some books and supplies for the children. She spent the afternoon talking to them, reading stories, and laughing with them. Ayan stayed mostly in the background, helping where needed, but she noticed the way he watched over the kids, like a father, protective and gentle. When she was about to leave, she handed him a small book. "This was my father's diary," she said. "He used to write about his students, his lessons, and his thoughts. I think you should have it." Ayan's hands shook as he took the book. "I don't deserve this," he said. She smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But sometimes we give things not because people deserve them, but because it helps us heal." He opened the first page that night. Inside, the teacher had written, "A good life is not one without mistakes, but one where you learn to rise after them." Ayan closed the book and held it to his chest. His heart felt full and broken at the same time. For years he had lived in regret, believing he didn't deserve peace. But that night he realized peace doesn't come from forgetting what you did. It comes from accepting it and trying to live better afterward. He began sharing small lessons from the diary with the children. He told them about kindness, patience, and responsibility. The kids loved those stories and often said, "Uncle, tell us one more." He smiled each time, thinking that in some small way the teacher's wisdom still lived on through him. Months passed, and the orphanage grew brighter, not because of money or paint, but because of love. Ayan was no longer the man who avoided people. He laughed with the children, joined them in games, and celebrated their birthdays. But every year on the same night of the accident, he lit a candle quietly by the gate, said a prayer, and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me how to live again." He knew he could never erase that one mistake, but now he understood something deeper. That even from guilt, something good can grow if you let it. And as the years went on, the man who once lived in shadows became a light for others. Years rolled by quietly, and time softened Ayan's face, but not his heart. His hair had turned mostly gray. His hands had grown wrinkled and rough, but his smile still carried warmth. The same gentle smile that comforted so many children through the years. The orphanage had changed too. What was once a few broken rooms and a small yard had now become a place full of life. The walls had been painted bright yellow. The garden bloomed with flowers, and laughter echoed in every corner. Ayan often sat outside in the evenings, watching the children run around. Many of the kids he had cared for were now grown-ups. Some came back to visit him with their own families, bringing gifts or homemade food. They would hug him tightly, calling him uncle with the same love they had as children. For them, he wasn't just a caretaker, he was family. A guide, a man who taught them kindness when the world had given them none. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Ayan sat on his old wooden chair near the gate, holding the teacher's diary in his lap. The pages had turned yellow, and the ink had faded a little, but he still read it often. It was his most precious thing. Each time he read those words, he felt as if the man he had once wronged was sitting beside him, talking to him like an old friend. He had read that diary so many times that he knew the lines by heart, but he still read it every night. It had become a ritual, a quiet conversation between his past and present. That evening, while he was lost in thought, a car stopped near the gate. From it stepped a woman and a teenage boy. It took Ayan a few seconds to recognize her. It was the teacher's daughter. She looked older now, her face gentle, her eyes calm and kind. The boy beside her looked about 16, tall with curious eyes. "Ayan," she said with a smile. "It's been a long time." He stood up slowly, smiling back. "Yes, it has been many years." "Please, come in." They sat in the garden. The children playing nearby waved and ran to greet her. She seemed happy to see how much the place had grown. "You've done so much here," she said softly. "It feels peaceful," Ayan smiled. "This place gave me peace. I didn't save them, they saved me." The boy beside her looked around, curious. "Mom told me you helped build this place," he said. "She said you used to be an engineer." Ayan chuckled softly. "I used to, yes. But life had other plans for me." The boy smiled. "I want to be an engineer too," he said proudly. "I like fixing things." "That's a good thing," Ayan said warmly. "People who fix things make the world better. Not just machines, but hearts too." The woman smiled, listening to their conversation quietly. There was a strange comfort in the air, as if something unspoken had finally settled between them. She looked at Ayan and said, "I wanted to bring my son here. I wanted him to see where kindness lives." Ayan's eyes softened. "You've raised a good boy," he said. "Your father would be proud." She looked at the sky for a moment. "I think he would have liked to meet you again," she said quietly. "Maybe he's watching." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that says more than words. A gentle wind moved through the flowers and the sound of laughter filled the air. For Ayan, this moment felt like closure. Not dramatic, not emotional, but peaceful. As evening turned to night, the woman and her son prepared to leave. Before going, she handed Ayan a small envelope. "This is for the orphanage," she said. "And something else inside, something personal." After they left, Ayan sat back on his chair, curious. He opened the envelope. Inside was a small note and an old photograph. The teacher's photo, smiling in his classroom. On the back of the photo were written just 5 words. "He forgave you long ago." Ayan's hands trembled as he read those words. His eyes blurred with tears, and for a long time he couldn't move. He pressed the photo against his heart and whispered, "Thank you." That night he sat under the stars, the photo still in his hand. He felt something he hadn't felt in decades, complete peace. The kind that comes when you've carried a burden for too long and finally put it down. In the days that followed, Ayan seemed lighter. The staff at the orphanage noticed it too. He laughed more, told more stories, even sang songs with the children. He started talking about building a small library for the kids, a place where they could read and dream. "Books," he told them, "can take you anywhere, even when your feet can't." One afternoon, while working in the garden, Ayan felt tired. He sat down under the tree watching the children play. He could hear their laughter, see the sunlight on their faces, and smell the flowers he had planted years ago. It felt perfect. He closed his eyes, smiling softly. When one of the boys ran to him a few minutes later, Ayan was still sitting peacefully, his hand resting on the teacher's diary. The boy called him again and again, but Ayan didn't respond. He had passed away quietly, with a smile on his face, the same gentle smile he always had when he looked at the children. The news spread quickly. The whole town came to the orphanage that evening. People cried, prayed, and shared stories about him. Many of the children he had raised returned. Some came from faraway cities, some from other countries. They all gathered in the garden, lighting candles, sharing memories. One of the older boys, now a teacher himself, spoke to the crowd. "He wasn't just an orphanage worker," he said. "He was our family. He taught us love, forgiveness, and kindness. He showed us that one mistake doesn't define a life, how you rise after it does." The woman who had once lost her father stood among them, tears shining in her eyes. She placed the photo of her father beside Ayan's candle. "They both taught us something," she said quietly. "That forgiveness can heal what time cannot." After the gathering ended, the children planted a small tree in the garden in his memory. They called it the Tree of Second Chances. Every year after that, they placed flowers under it and shared stories about Ayan, about how he made them laugh, how he listened when they cried, how he reminded them to be kind even when life was not. Years later, that tree grew tall and strong. The orphanage continued to thrive, run by the very children Ayan had once cared for. They kept his picture on the wall next to the teacher's photo, side by side. Two men who had changed each other's lives in ways neither could have imagined. The boy who once said he wanted to be an engineer grew up and became one. He helped design new buildings for the orphanage, making sure every room had sunlight and space for laughter. On the wall near the main gate, he hung a sign that read, "One mistake doesn't end a life. It teaches how to live it better." Visitors often came to the orphanage, inspired by its story. Some asked who Ayan was. The children would smile proudly and say, "He was the man who made this place home." Even though Ayan was gone, his presence remained in every corner, in the sound of laughter, the flowers in the garden, and the lessons passed down through generations. His story became more than a memory. It became a reminder that life is not about being perfect, but about trying to make things right no matter how broken they once were. In the end, Ayan's life came full circle. The mistake that once destroyed him became the reason he built something beautiful. His guilt turned into compassion, his pain into purpose, and his regret into peace. And though he was gone, his message lived on, whispered in the wind that moved through the garden, spoken by the children who grew up under his care. One mistake can change a life, but love can change it back.